Good afternoon. My name is Chris and this is Wendy with Police on Guard. And also joining us today is Clay and Aaron. And we'll be answering questions in regard to the upcoming court action regarding the federal mandates. So I'm going to start off by opening up to Clay and Aaron to bring questions towards us for us to answer and hopefully address some of these questions for everyone listening here today.
So I think we should start off with the criteria for being involved.
Okay. So the criteria set out by Rocco Galletti of the Constitutional Rights Center for being on the lawsuit is as follows. You must be a federal employee or federally regulated employee. You must not have received a COVID-19 vaccine. No frequent testing in the context of employment. Do not vacate your position, but rather maintain your contract of employment, leaving it to the employer to breach this contract. Do not seek an exemption letter for medical or religious reasons as it acquiesces to the mandate. The cost of the retainer, as set out by Rocco, is $1,000 per person, and the deadline for it to be sent back with the fee is October 31st. If you wish to be a part of this court action and meet the stipulated criteria, as set out by Rocco, please send out an email to fedemployeelawsuit@protonmail.com and include your full name, your email address, phone number, and who you work for, and mention that you meet and will adhere to the criteria throughout this court process, and an email will be forwarded back to you containing the retainer and instructions.
Okay, well, we'll go to our first question from you two. Can we ask that our natural immunity status be recognized such that we have nothing to do with the policy and should not be forced into leave without pay while not accepting the policy as legitimate?
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with asking for some type of indication for natural immunity. That won't negate you from the lawsuit.
And there was actually a follow-up to that one as well.
Okay.
This individual is just wondering if they're thinking about doing a serology test to see if that would also be recognized, as the boss is putting quite a bit of pressure on about the attestation.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with anything like that. The only thing that we ask for, that we stipulated in the criteria itself, is that no religious or medical exemptions be requested, even requested. So if you just requested it, that too would negate you from the lawsuit.
Okay, we have another individual wondering if they can be fired if their employer finds out they're part of the lawsuit.
Well, technically you could be fired, but that would be what Rocco's going to do. Is alongside of the actual lawsuit itself is he's going to file a motion asking everybody that's been fired or placed on leave without pay to be reinstated until the outcome of the trial itself or the court case.
And I understand that those things won't necessarily coincide at the initial time of filing.
Yeah, when he first files the notice of application, that's just to notify the courts that there is an actual case being written and to be presented at some point in the future. When the notice of application is filed, that will be the first step. The next step will be to file the actual case with all the evidence, as well as the motion to reinstate should that happen.
We have one here that's maybe a little more along the lines of criminal, maybe a little outside of the lawsuit. The question is, will anyone be held accountable and or charged for what they've done to us in Canada as followed?
I mean, that could be sometime in the future, yes. A part of this lawsuit, no. What we're addressing in this lawsuit is the unconstitutional measures. So that would be, or the mandates, which would be vaccination in the context of employment, as well as vaccine passports. So that's what this specific lawsuit is dealing with.
How about if they belong to a union? This person is asking, basically they're saying that if they've heard that if they go through a lawyer, if they belong to a union, basically it does nothing.
Okay, so Rocco has addressed that before, and basically what he's indicated is that the collective bargaining agreement that you agree to with your union does not cover intentional tort, which is extortion. So you did not agree to forced vaccination, you did not agree to this vaccination in the context of employment, so therefore approaching a lawyer outside of what's going on right now, you do not have to file a grievance first, because that is not within the collective bargaining agreement that you agreed to when you were hired.
Another one coming up here is that will their employers be notified that they're on the lawsuit, or would they need to essentially search it to find that information out. And again, asking about repercussions.
Yeah, so your employer would have to search that out. There is a level of protection, I believe, when you're on a lawsuit as this, because being fired as a result of this would be wrongful dismissal. So you do have a level of protection on this, but there won't, when the notice of application goes public, then your employer will have access to that if they wish. You are able to be named as John and Jane Doe on the actual lawsuit, but remember, when we get to court, if courts deem that all the John and Jane Does need to be identified, then we will contact you, ask you if you still want to be on the lawsuit itself, and if you do, that's great, then we can put your name in there. If not, you will be removed from the lawsuit as per your choice, but the retainer fee will not be retained, because at that point in time, it's being used to develop the case, as well as pay for all the expert witnesses and stuff that's going to be needed.
And also to that end, I understand from the Ontario action, in speaking with Rocco, that when you do put your name down as John or Jane Doe, should you meet reprisals, my understanding was that that level of protection is harder to kind of obtain because you're not actually listed in name on the lawsuit. Whereas if you are, that level of protection is there because you are not being anonymously listed, and if you should meet reprisal, it is assumed that it is as a result.
I mean, good point. If you are named, that does give you that level of protection as opposed to the John and Jane Doe. So yeah, good point.
Maybe a little bit more housekeeping with this, just for our feed here today. Is this going to be, this video available later for people to re-watch?
Yeah.
Or if they can't watch for the entire time?
Absolutely, yeah. It'll be recorded and available on our YouTube channel, and we'll be uploading it as well to all of our social media in the next day or two.
And on that note, if you have others that you think might be interested in joining, this would be a really good opportunity to share that link of today's question and answer so that we can get those questions answered for everybody and just clear the air of any uncertainty that might surround it.
Next question, if I'm put on leave without pay, would they owe me a severance right away?
Probably not right away, but Rocco is also addressing the back pay that will happen when we win this case. Let's be positive about this. So when we win this case, Rocco will address the back pay as well that will happen when you're on leave without pay.
Again, maybe a little bit more of housekeeping on it. Just heard CBC is trying to stop employees from being put on leave from, employees that are being put on leave without pay from receiving EI. Is that legally possible?
We're not lawyers, so we can't answer those types of questions. It would just be something on a case per case basis that you would have to address. I'm not sure I know the answer to that question, and I don't want to give anybody some false information, so I think I'm not going to.
Yeah, I would say that because we can't answer that now because we don't have the answer to that, but it's certainly something that we can inquire about and get that information out there once we were able to get the answer.
Okay, another question. I was told by employer relations that after being put on LWOP, the corporation would determine how long I am on leave before I'm let go. Please advise.
And that would be a case per case basis.
Yeah.
We can't say whether, how long that's going to be.
Here's one with regards to unions that are involved. Are the unions going to be held accountable following this? They never solicited the membership from August, and PIPSC claims they were never involved in the development of the policy, yet the G&M says that they received a copy.
Okay.
Just a little housekeeping note for your questions. If folks could keep from short forms, we have multiple agencies that are involved in this, and we all have our own little acronyms and whatnot. Please make sure that your questions are filled out in plain speech.
Yeah, as to that question, with regards to unions, that's not something this court case is dealing with. This court case is dealing specifically with vaccinations in the context of employment and vaccine passports. If at some point perhaps a class action is brought against, that would be up to you and your fellow employees in order to do something like that with regards to or respect to your union. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I would agree on that.
Yeah.
Question about the military, obviously federally regulated, just a member asking if they can be involved.
military, federally regulated, that classifies you, and as long as you meet all that criteria, you can absolutely be involved, and we do have many military on the lawsuit as well.
Just maybe a quick one on timing with this. What's the time frame associated with a case of this magnitude?
So depending on how Rocco decides to proceed, whether it be injunction, which he has not decided on yet, but whether it be injunction or a regular court case, we estimate roughly a year, but again, it's just not something we can predict at this point in time, but he will have it filed shortly within the new year, I imagine, if we can get this up and going, by the deadline of October 31st.
This individual is asking how labor laws trump the Constitution because they've heard that lawyers are indicating that labor laws in Ontario are trumping everything.
Not something we can address. We're not lawyers, we're not labor lawyers. We're going by what our Rocco Galletti Constitutional Rights Center is saying, and he is saying that this is all illegal and this should be addressed. So we're going on what his advice and expertise is saying.
As the charter, to most people's understanding, is the predominant law of the land, right? Just as we've talked about before, and as so many officers know, that when you're a police officer on the front lines and you're fulfilling your duties, if you're not upholding the charter and the application of those duties, what happens when it gets to court? I think everyone that has brought cases to court knows the answer to that. Charter breach violations often in turn result in the removal of the charges before the courts. So if that is the precedent that has been set historically, just based on layman's understanding, that would be my understanding of the charter as it pertains to everything. But we're not lawyers, so our understanding is obviously just kind of tongue-in-cheek in a sense, but that's why we're seeking the legal representation we are, because they have that knowledge and they've worked with it throughout their careers and they have a very well-versed knowledge of it. So.
Yeah, and you have to remember too that, case law and precedent has already been set with regards to mandatory vaccination. So the only reason this is happening right now is because they're using it under the context of the pandemic, right? So that's why Rocco's so confident that this will go forward based on that, because we already have precedent set against that.
Again, maybe another housekeeping item. Can I contact Mr. Galati directly with questions throughout this process?
Yes, no, absolutely not. Please do not contact him. We've sent over 22 to 2,300 emails out, so I'm sure you can imagine what would happen if 2,300 people were contacting him. We will be setting up a committee of 5 people, and those 5 people will be dealing directly with Rocco. That will then be disseminated to the rest of the people on the actual lawsuit. So we're doing our best to address any questions that are coming in. We're answering them as best we can in emails. We've done the question and answer on our website and social media to help you guys, and that's why we decided to do this today, to give you something extra and answer the questions that you have. We'll be updating those questions when we get them on our website, and any questions you have that we haven't already answered, we'll take to Rocco and we'll make sure that that's addressed. But no, please do not contact him. He has asked that it goes through all of us and the committee, and then we will disseminate that to the rest of the people on the lawsuit.
So next question, I was forced to take a PCR test to keep me out of the COVID ward prior to mandates. Do I still qualify?
Yes, you do. So the PCR is just surrounding the context of employment. So if your employer is saying no to the vaccine, but that you have to take PCR tests in order to maintain employment, then that would be something that wouldn't be allowed. So we understand that people do need to take it for other reasons outside of that. That to the best of your ability, if you're able to avoid it, that would be great. But if it's an unavoidable situation like that, then that's absolutely fine and you can still be on the lawsuit.
For some of our short timers out there that are luckily looking towards retirement, it's a question, can I be part of the lawsuit if I am retiring?
Yes, so Rocco has addressed that if you're retiring, we're going to say a safe bet for notice of application filed is January 1st. Don't panic, it could be before that. I'm just trying to give a little bit leeway on the back end here. So if we file by January 1st, 2022, then you should still be employed at the time the notice of application is filed. The other aspect is if you're retiring because of the mandates, so you feel you're being forced out because of this, Rocco has mentioned you can also be on the lawsuit.
In effect, are we suing anyone with this?
No, we're not suing anybody. We're not asking for monetary damages here. We're asking for the unconstitutional mandates that have been handed down to be quashed, is basically what's happening. So you're not suing your employer, we're not suing the government, we're just asking for clarification surrounding these mandates. Your employers will be named on the lawsuit as well as specific government officials because there has to be a different lawsuit, but we're not suing anybody for anything.
Yeah, for damages.
Yeah, for damages,
For
correct,
damages.
for damages.
What happens if Rocco loses and they have to pay additional fees?
Okay, so Rocco did address that in the actual retainer itself. So basically the court may or may not award costs to either the plaintiffs or the defendants. It's extremely rare that the courts would award costs to the defendant in this case, which is the government, but it is a possibility. Rocco did mention that there's a ceiling on the federal courts that they must abide by, and that roughly, he said it would be a couple $100,000. So you can do the math, because
That's a worst case scenario.
that's a worst case scenario, right? So it's very rare, but if that's the case, then that would be split between all the applicants on the actual case. So if 1,000 applicants are on the case, then you split a couple $100,000 between that. You're looking at anywhere maybe between $200 to $500 additional. However, extremely rare that that's going to happen.
And that would be in the event that it has received a negative ruling at the onset, but there's also the appellate courts,
Right.
which would be bringing it further to the next stage, which would be the Supreme Court of Canada, or whatever that appellate court process would deem necessary. So it's not like first shot, if there's not the results that we're seeking, that it's dead in the water. It would still progress.
Well, and you gotta remember too, that regardless of who wins this, if their side wins in the first instance, we would appeal. If we win in the first instance, chances are they're going to appeal. So it will be going to the Supreme Court, I think, eventually. I think that's kind of what we predict, so.
So we're getting some more questions about workplace mandates and testing and whatnot. And questions, they're only giving the two options, which obviously both violate Rocco's criteria. So maybe we can speak to them adhering to that criteria, just to review that.
I can go over the points of the criteria again, just to refresh everyone in case there was an issue with sound, just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding here. So the 5 essential criteria is must be a federal employee or federally regulated employee, must not have received a COVID-19 vaccine, no frequent testing in the context of employment, do not vacate your position but rather maintain your contract of employment, leaving it to the employer to breach this contract, and do not seek an exemption letter for medical or religious reasons as it is acquiescing to the mandate. So to that end, I mean, I don't know if you want to elaborate further on that with some
So
of the...
if we're talking about like an attestation form as well, we could talk about, if you're on the lawsuit and you're willing to push this to the point of potentially being fired or being placed on leave without pay, then if you're already accepting that, then filling out an attestation form, there's really no point if it's going to end up in the exact same issue for you. However, Rocco's mentioned that all of that is illegal, them asking for that for you. However, everybody's going to make their own decision, and that would not remove you from the lawsuit if you filled out the attestation form.
Yeah.
There's some questions for people who are on leave currently. They're wondering if they'll be if the lawsuit's available to them as well.
Yep, anybody on parental, maternity, sick leave, anything like that, yes, you can still be a part of the lawsuit.
And then obviously some other questions, another person's asking if they're new, they've been only hired for maybe a year or less, or do they qualify?
Yep, anybody qualifies, as long as you're employed by a federal or federally regulated employer, then you can be a part of the lawsuit.
Are there any guarantees that we're actually going to keep our jobs once the lawsuit is over, or is there a promise of that? at the completion?
I would love to give you a ironclad promise at this point in time, but as we've seen in the past 18 months, there's been curveballs thrown at us left, right, and center. So we're confident. That's why we took this on and why Police on Guard decided to spearhead this. But
Yeah, and I would also say in regards to that, it's important to remember, if you're looking for guarantees, it's hard to give one, but that's why we're moving forward with the court process, because in the absence of taking this action, there's more of a guarantee, I would surmise, that
Yeah.
you're facing some undue hardship, whereas going forward with this court process is not a guarantee, but it increases your odds if you want to look at it on a percentage range, right? And I think it's important to also bring up, for everyone listening, Southwest Airlines has a really good benchmark example when the entire employment group of Southwest Airlines was presented with their mandate. They had a large group of people that refused to comply and move forward because they felt that their rights and the constitutional rights down in the states were being violated. And through unified non-compliance, it resulted in a reversal of the mandate. So I think everyone pulling in the same direction, grabbing the rope and pulling in the same direction together, and this court action is a really good opportunity for us to do that, creates more of a higher probability of protecting yourself and your employment.
absolutely, and there's no other avenues available to us at this time. So this is our best bet and our best shot to turn this around for everybody, not just, even if you're not on the lawsuit, even if you're a provincial employee or a municipal employee, this federal lawsuit going forward would affect you as well, and you would benefit from the same ruling as everybody else on this lawsuit would. So the more support and people we can get on the lawsuit, and just think of that when it's given to the court, 300 people as opposed to 1,000 plus people or 10,000 plus people would be a huge eye-opener for them. So the more people we can get involved and the more we can get this out there for people to join, that's what we need to do in order to prove to them that everybody's on side and we're not going to stand up for that united non-compliance that Chris was talking about.
Thanks, Wendy. Next one here we have, why is being vaccinated holding us out from participation? Why does it matter whether someone has received it or not? Shouldn't that information remain personal and private?
Not when you're addressing vaccination in the context of employment. If we're addressing vaccination in the context of employment as being unconstitutional and illegal, then being a part of a lawsuit where you've agreed to the mandates that you're taking to court would be opposite ends of the scale. And if you think of this in the context of being on a witness stand, that would be a very one or two question addressed to you on the witness stand in order to discredit you if you've taken it. So this is just what's handed down from Rocco as part of the criteria, so we're just following his directions. Anything to add?
No, that pretty much sums it up as far as you explained it to us, yeah.
We're just looking through we're scrolling through the questions. There's a lot of repeats
Yeah, that's
happening.
okay.
And for those that didn't have their questions answered, that might have just posted them because they might have been answered earlier. As I said before, Wendy had said before, we will be posting this afterwards for review again. So hopefully you're able to have those questions addressed.
Here's one for maybe a broader spectrum of federal employees. Is it just for the core administration mandate, the ones that they've outlined, or can any federal employees of other agencies that implement their own policies be covered under this as well? I think it's looking basically any federal employee is what they're asking about.
Well, yeah, if you're federal or a federally regulated employee, then you can join the lawsuit, regardless of what your employer is saying or not saying. You've been mandated by the government to be vaccinated. So your employer also should be saying to you that you must get vaccinated. I mean, if you've got, lucky enough for you, if you've got a great employer that's not mandating that for you, then bonus to you. But I think the majority of them out there are mandating this. So.
We're getting a few repeat questions there based on arrests of public officials, and even some asking citizens' powers of arrest for public officials and moving that forward. I understand that's not necessarily the heart of our talk here, but we could maybe just briefly go over that.
Yeah, so that's been brought up to us numerous times, and we get this a lot. I think what you need to understand is there needs to be, I think, a basis for things going forward, which is some of these court cases, number one. I think that type of thing would probably become in the future. I mean, if we're talking something like, history, like something like Nuremberg, let's say, where it wasn't until years afterwards where the evidence was there and everything came out and there was already some rulings with regards to what happened. So the reason why nobody's going out there and doing that right now is because you need to understand as well that the Attorney General has the ability to drop any charges that come forward as well. So we're not confident at this point in time that would even get past the first instance. So, and it's not something that we're addressing right now. We're just addressing strictly what the mandates are coming down, and we're trying to address those specific things in courts so that we can get those on case law and precedent set so that we can not have this happen again. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
Well, I think that summarizes it pretty well as to where we kind of stand on that as police on guard and from our council with Rocco.
Yeah.
So.
okay, I'm just going to address some of the other questions if we could. Just one other thing here. So is the retainer refundable? Like I said before, it won't be refundable after we give all the names to Rocco himself, and he then proceeds with the notice of application. So at that point in time, it wouldn't be refundable after that. So if you have any other questions, the only thing I can suggest is to email us at that Fed employee lawsuit at protonmail.com, and we will do our best to get back to you. We are being inundated with messages. Just please be patient with us. The other thing to remember is we're all volunteers, right? And we're doing this for all of you guys. So we're doing our best. You know, we're spearheading this for you, and we're glad and happy to do it. Just be patient with us and understand that, you know, we're working alongside you, and we're all kind of linking arms together to get this done, and that's how we do that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Okay, well, no, I think that addressed a lot of questions that people have had that we've heard over these last weeks.
Definitely.
And we wanted to make sure that we had given the opportunity to address them as best we can. And any further questions, as we mentioned before, we will do our best to address them as well and bring them to Rocco. It's important that everyone spreads the word and passes this along to others that might not have heard of this opportunity so that we can grow this to a formidable size and able to move forward and hopefully get that relief that everybody is seeking. So I appreciate everyone's time and also understand, as Wendy said, that we are a not-for-profit organization filled with volunteers, and everyone that is working without pay and doing it because they're passionately believing in what it is that we have to do moving forward. So I thank everyone today. I thank you, Wendy, for addressing these questions, and I thank Clay and Aaron as well for bringing them forward, and I thank everyone for their time today, and hopefully this cleared some of the air for some folks.
And just remember, strength in numbers. You know, we're all in this together. So let's stand up and let's link arms and let's get this done, and let's address these mandates for everybody. Take care, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.